Good day and welcome back to another World of Warcraft video, or your first World of Warcraft video. In this video we'll be covering the very basics to starting your journey in World of Warcraft. We'll be covering very basic concepts here, things like which version to play, basically how to select your class race, and enjoy the game, plus some lore and other tips and tricks. I hope this helps players get into World of Warcraft, so let's begin. And let's begin with talking about the differences in versions. There are two different states of World of Warcraft. There's World of Warcraft Live, or Retail as it's known, which features everything up to the War Within expansion. Fundamentally, the gameplay and functions in this game are a lot faster and more modernized than the Ultimate version, World of Warcraft Classic. This game has gone through multiple iterations, updates, and features a lot of new modern conveniences that players might expect in other MMOs. World of Warcraft Classic is a little bit different. Not only is it an older version of the game, but there are about 4 or 5 different versions of the game. You have Season of Discovery, you have the Classic Realms, you have the Classic Realms that feature all the way up to Cataclysm, and you have the Hardcore Classic Realms, which are where your character will be permanently deleted should they ever be defeated. Because of this, it can be very confusing. On top of that, the gameplay in World of Warcraft Classic is fundamentally a lot slower and more heavily RPG influenced than Retail, especially the first iteration of World of Warcraft. Everything from World of Warcraft Classic to Lich King to the Burning Crusade is quite a slower pace comparative to Retail. My suggestion to a lot of players is to start with Retail World of Warcraft. The reason for this is twofold. Firstly, Retail World of Warcraft is just more accessible to new players. The population is more heavily condensed, and in general, the accessibility for new players is a lot faster and easier to get into. If you like World of Warcraft Retail, then definitely consider checking out Classic. You may enjoy it, especially if you enjoyed older RPGs. Now we've selected World of Warcraft Retail, we've got to know a little bit about the game. So let's talk about the lore of World of Warcraft. I won't be covering everything in detail, but I'll be giving you pretty much enough to know kind of what's going on. There are some very key concepts to understand. The World of Warcraft starts roughly 4 years after the end of the Frozen Throne Burning Reign of Chaos expansions for the Warcraft 3 RTS game. World of Warcraft has two major factions, the Horde and the Alliance. These two factions usually have incentive to fight against each other, but especially in modern World of Warcraft, they most times are forced to come together and represent different races and sub-factions. But they ultimately usually fight various ultimate evils that take on the world of Azeroth. See, the important thing to understand in the Warcraft universe is that planets are not just normal planets. They actually contain the souls of long-lost godlike beings called Titans. There are various enemies that will come to try to claim powers within the world of Azeroth, which is one of the last planets that has a growing Titan inside of it. The big threats to Azeroth usually pertain to the Legion, a force of demons that are traveling across the universes to smite Titans in advance, bar they become corrupted. Death itself, a force that exists within the world in alternate dimensions. The Void, which is also an alternate dimensional force that can potentially take over the souls of Titans to enter the world physically, and beyond that, tons of other various factions, clans, and subpowers within the World of Warcraft universe. Everything ranging from primal forces that existed within Azeroth before its world soul even began, to just the factions on the actual planet surface deciding to have a bit of a war with each other. The World of Warcraft lore is much better explained in more recent expansions through the use of cutscenes and campaign quest guidelines. Earlier expansions like Classic, and even TBC generally had their story told more atmospherically. Nowadays we have a lot more cutscenes and guidance. I suggest later on what expansion to start with to help you with the story, but being familiar with these key concepts like world souls, different factions, and the understanding of Azeroth as it is will assist you with understanding some of the core concepts portrayed to you. Now let's talk about classes, roles, and how to pick your characters. So the first thing we'll tackle is race. Race determines two very core components to your character. Firstly, what faction they're on, and secondly, their accessibility to certain classes. Some races cannot play certain classes, so if you want to play a certain class, you probably have to consider playing a race that can do so. Races do have racial traits. These traits are toned down a little bit in modern World of Warcraft to be more flavor orientated than key components, but they do have still an effect on your gameplay. So consider them if you really want to kind of immerse yourself into a certain play style. What's super important is that not every race will be available to you from the start. Certain races are locked behind completion of certain campaigns, events, achievements, but generally speaking just getting to a higher level on the more classic races before unlocking access to them. When you're choosing your race, the most important thing to factor in is the faction. Although World of Warcraft has now in retail created a lot of cross-faction gameplay mechanisms, if you plan on playing with friends, being on the same faction is still incredibly important towards really integrating fully into every aspect of World of Warcraft without encountering difficulties that you may have to work around. My suggestion is to focus on faction first, and then choosing a race that allows you to play the class that you want. Speaking of classes, we need to understand, firstly, roles. When I talk about classes, something that's going to pop up a lot is what role you're going to play with that class. Roles are broken into three sections. You have healers, tanks, and damage dealers. All of these will come into fruition in group gameplay at the end of the game, and the duty you perform or the responsibilities you have in group content will be determined by what you are playing. Healers have the responsibility for healing the group. Tanks have the responsibility for soaking up damage, drawing the attention of enemies away from the group, and from positioning certain mechanics. And then finally we have damage dealers. Their job is probably what one would consider the most fun, being the defeating of enemies and dishing out the big deeps. The big thing about damage dealers is that at endgame it's actually a very competitive specialization. So choosing it early on is the preferred new player experience, but you may find yourself leaning towards healer or tank if you're struggling in endgame content. It's important to understand that the classes are not just a cosmetic change. They functionally change your spellbook and talents across each of them. All classes share a class tree on the left hand side and a specialization tree on the right hand side of their talents. That right hand side is going to change based on your specialization. My suggestion for new players is always to choose classes that are DPS. This helps you a lot with questing, and then you can consider changing later on once you're a bit more familiar with the baseline mechanics of the game. Let's talk about which classes then. So now we understand our roles a bit better, there are still some other things to consider with your class. Do you want to be ranged? Do you want to fire attacks from far away? Do you want to be a melee class, which will perform combat up close? Do you want to be a class that summons and casts spells? Or do you wish to be a class that has versatility? For new players, there are a lot of considerations to make, and sometimes choosing the wrong class can hinder your experience. You may not resonate with a certain playstyle, you may not feel accustomed to the certain duties or responsibilities you've been given, and so it can be a bit of a daunting task. My suggestion is first and foremost, choose whatever you think looks coolest. Unfortunately, a lot of people try to really sell there are classes to start with concept, and although some classes definitely are better in terms of ease. Ultimately, if you want to fire giant fireballs from your hands, or rain fire from the sky, or summon demons, you need to play classes that do that. Your class fantasy and the idea of being the character you want to be is more important than anything else. I do, however, have some suggestions that may help players who are still nervous about picking their first class. The first thing I would suggest is that if you're nervous, click the class trial button in the bottom right hand corner. This will let you, at the very least, play some DPS specs of the various classes, allowing you to at least experience some of the spells at a relatively higher level. What I also suggest as well is, as I mentioned before, playing predominantly a DPS specialization when you do take on the class. Now, in terms of the classes that I think are best for new players, my considerations would largely be towards Hunter. Hunter is great as it's ranged, allowing you to avoid damage. It also is a damage dealing class, allowing you to clear up quests, and it features a pet who can tank for you, which helps you a ton in some harder quests or bosses, especially when you're learning the mechanics. Paladins are also great because all three specs wear plated armor. All three specs have access to healing spells, and this can make you fairly tanky. It allows you to screw up a little bit in combat and gives you a bit of a flat baseline. Druid is also great. It's slightly more complicated than the other ones I've chosen, but what I like about it is the versatility. You have access to 4 specs and all 3 archetypes of playstyle. This can help you a lot. When you're starting to level your character, your first character will be forced to play through Exile's Reach. This is by far and away the best way to start the game anyway, so my suggestion is to just roll with it. Don't worry about it. Exile's Reach has been designed to allow you to experience the game, get a good tutorial, and work your way through some light, I want to say replica group content, whilst teaching you some crucial core components of the game. Exile's Reach will give you the basics you need to progress through the campaign later with your character. This is of utmost importance. Once you finish Exile's Reach, your next best step is to start with Dragonflight. At this point right now, Dragonflight is the main expansion. It has a big recommended sign above it. When the expansions get replaced, it'll be replaced with The War Within, and you will click that one. The reason it's recommended is because it gives you the best story experience to cater you towards whichever expansion has just been released. So at the time of this video, completing Dragonflight, or at least partaking in Dragonflight, gives you lore and enough idea of what's actually happening prior to The War Within. So as you level through it, you can have a bit of a good baseline to understanding what you actually need to do. For me, this is fundamentally the best choice. Not only that, but Dragonflight also doubles up by giving you a really cool flying mount quite early on. And I find that this is really awesome. It allows players to zoom around the map, have access to a mount, and just generally have a good time. Now, before we talk about completing quests and moving through the campaign, a lot of players will ask, well, what about dungeons? What about instance content? Now, I want to specify this, that doing dungeons as a new player is an experience you should do. You will press I on your keyboard. This will open up the Dungeons and Raid Finder UI. This will allow you to select either random or specific dungeons, and if you've chosen Dragonflight, you will have the options presented on screen. Just select random. It gives you bonus EXP, and there's no reason to choose a specific dungeon. Don't be scared to queue for dungeons. Whether you're a healer, a tank, or a DPS, you should be a DPS, hopefully. Rather try a dungeon. Even if you fail, it's okay. Type in the group chat that you're new to the game. People will be a little bit more understanding. What I do suggest, though, before you get into dungeons, at the very least, and especially if you're playing a healer or tank, take some time to quest and just discover what your abilities do, so that you are having a much better time when you enter into the dungeon. Start at around level 20. I find it's a good place to start. You've experienced a bit of the game, you've tried out a bit of your spells, you're not entirely brand spanking new. Questing is your bread and butter though, and questing is how you are meant to progress through the game. People will have boosts that they have received when buying new expansions, and I always suggest never ever using these boosts. It is imperative that you level your first character. Two reasons for this. Firstly, it helps you to learn the game, which is very crucial, and secondly, if you don't like the class you're playing and you get it to level 70, you can use the boost on a different class. So then you'll have two level 70s and two different options. Questing is very straightforward now. You will see lots of quests with this big fat shield on it called campaign. You just follow these quests. There will be other side quests, local stories, important quests, etc. that you are welcome to pick up. But as long as you follow the shield quests, you will get to where you need to go. So definitely do those. They are of the utmost importance. Then, obviously, what do we need to consider next? So, firstly, when questing, it is super important to understand that there are numerous different tasks you can be given. Some quests can be as simple as speaking to quest givers. Other quests require you to loot enemies. Some quests require you to defeat enemies. On your minimap, you'll often see blue highlighted circles. These will indicate areas where enemies or loot or things can be found. Try, if you're stuck, to read your quests. A lot of the times, especially in WoW, it can be very simple as to, oh, I just want to kind of take out enemies and do things. On top of that as well, while questing, you'll often see bonus objectives pop up. I highly advise you do these because they give you bonus XP and resources, which can help you out and level you a little bit faster. But leveling and just doing content, whether it's finding treasures, defeating rares, is your key component, as it's going to be how you level up. Leveling up in World of Warcraft is significant. It does two major things. Firstly, it will increase your baseline stats, your health, your primary stats, etc. And it gives you a point for your talent tree. The points will alternate, so you'll get 1 point every alternative level for assassination and rogue. So at level 19 I got for assassination, then I'll get 1 point at level 20 for rogue. It is of utmost importance that you spend these, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So now we know about leveling up, what other things should we really consider? So one of the questions that a lot of players ask me is, should I pick up professions as a new player? My suggestion is that you can. There's nothing stopping you from picking up professions as a player. I highly suggest you pick up a gathering profession and a crafting profession. If you want more information on the process of selecting based on your class, spec, etc., I will leave a link in the top right hand corner to a video I did on that subject matter. But generally speaking, there's no harm in picking up a profession. However, especially while leveling, your chances of fundamentally using that profession to its fullest extent is very limited. You are not going to be able to use that profession very well. The speed at which you level, the speed at which you move through zones, and just in general your gameplay pace is not going to really take you with time to pick up professions. If you're looking to boost your leveling, I would suggest picking up herbalism and mining, as you can always change them out later on, but while you are flying from quest to quest, you can at least pick up resources to sell, or, and importantly, that give you EXP to move up and level. So that is that for the basics of leveling. But let's talk about some tips that are going to help you a ton with your experience in World of Warcraft. Firstly, skill points. Make sure that you spend them. Every time you level, spend your skill point immediately as soon as you are out of combat. Even if you spend the skill point in the wrong area, per se, wrong in inverted commas, even if you pick the worst choice that you possibly could, it is still better than not spending it. So make sure that you do so. If you're looking for builds, there are plenty of resources like Icy Veins, Wowhead, etc. that can help you out a ton. On top of that, people will ask me, do I activate War Mode? War Mode is a part of the game that allows you to increase your EXP gain when you hit level 20 in exchange for fighting other players in the open world. Whether you're on a PvE or PvP server, or PvE server now, I highly suggest you do not do this as a new player. Most people will ignore you, but there's always that one guy that takes a lot of joy in beating you up and ruining your experience. Another tip is hearthstones and inns. On your map you won't see inns appear, but on your mini-map you will see an icon for them, which will be able to help you out a ton. Inns serve two purposes. Firstly, they're great places to set your hearthstone to. This allows you fundamentally to grab yourself a place that will allow you to continue questing from. I highly suggest changing your hearthstone to, at the very least, an inn in Veldraken, for example, while questing in Dragonflight. But two, most inns, and just in general, what you're looking for is little Z's above your head. This indicates that you're gaining rested EXP. When you log off, your character will build up a blue bar that will give them a bonus when they defeat enemies when you log back in. It helps to speed up your leveling process, and just in general is a good tip for players to follow while leveling. On top of that, let's talk about finding our way around the world. On your minimap, if you click L and click Map Legend under your quest log, you will see what's called a teleporter portal. In Orgrimmar and Stormwind, specifically, there are teleporter portal rooms. These give you access to numerous portals that will take you across all the expansions and major regions of World of Warcraft. These are great should you forget to set your hearthstone. If you need to quickly move from quest zone to quest zone, you're going to spend so much time moving through these portal rooms in World of Warcraft, so it's best to familiarize yourself with their location and also the portals you need to take to get to your relevant expansion. On top of that, the other tip that I'd like to give you is the adventure guide. The adventure guide will feed you content as you reach certain milestones and levels, whether it is live events like Darkmoon Fair, whether it is certain content or quests or important side quests that unlock features. It is always good to take a look at your adventurer's guide from time to time and engage with the options that it gives you. Sometimes it will lead you in places that you may not want to go, but generally if you just pick up one or two things from there, it can definitely help you. And if you get lost or you forget to take a quest, it can also lead you in the right direction. So the last two really important things I want to touch on. So the first is action bars and key bindings. If you go to options, game, under gameplay, find action bars and switch on action bars 2, 3, 4, and 5. This will give you some sidebars where generally I'll put my non-combat abilities, the mounts I'm using, my fishing skill, anything really that's just not a combat-based ability that I may want access to at a quick notice. These generally I don't keybind because it's just not something super relevant. Then the next thing you must do, keybind your abilities. It's something I always forget to do when I come back to World of Warcraft. Way too late into the season because I'm lazy. But keybinding your abilities, being comfortable with your keyboard layout and where your abilities are, is going to help you a ton, especially if you keep your action skills on the first two bars at the bottom. Generally, that's a good place to begin. Other things like subtitles, whether you need those or graphical display, you can adjust as you go along, but key bindings and action bars is something very important. Something else you're going to see a lot of people mention is add-ons. I do not suggest installing add-ons for the first, I would say, 10 to 20 levels of your World of Warcraft experience. You don't need recount when you're doing leveling dungeons. You don't need TBM. You don't need anything like that. Even if you are doing dungeons, generally the way it works with leveling, you're not going to need TBM to be absolutely perfect in them. Add-ons are amazing, and I use a ton of them, and I have a video about how you can install and what to use. I'll leave it in the top right hand corner, but as a beginning player, give yourself time to settle in with the basics, and then maybe at around level 30, once you're comfortable with what you're doing, you can roll on into installing some add-ons. And last but not least, take your time. World of Warcraft main gameplay is defeating enemies, questing, and doing dungeons. Even in-game, it's questing, doing dungeons, and then the only thing you add in is either PvP or raiding. Yes, there's delves, yes, there's world content, but generally speaking, it all boils down to defeating things and doing quests. So if you're not enjoying that during leveling to some extent, chances are you won't enjoy World of Warcraft. So take it easy and enjoy your ride. See you in Azeroth.